Welcome to Better Than We Found It, the podcast for leaders driven to leave a positive mark through their leadership.
I hope that I will have created some ways in which the circumstances of your birth don't predict the opportunities you have in your life.
I'm Josh Huggins, your host and the founder of GS2 Partnership, a search firm committed to connecting visionaries dedicated to environmental and social betterment.
I have two young sons. I want to be able to tell them I did use the resources and expertise of a company to try to create more awareness about climate change.
In each episode, we delve into the minds of executive and future leaders. We discuss how sustainability guides responsible leadership, sparks change, and drives value.
The way of thinking I try and advocate is for us all to think about us having a collective problem to fix, which is climate, and that we need to rebuild our global economy.
We are GS2, and we are on a critical journey to connect to those who believe in leaving the world better than we found it. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Better Than We Found It. On today's show, we're thrilled to have Rawaa Ammar with us, a trailblazer in the sustainable textile and fashion industry, combining circular technology and business models into what is quite an archaic system. Originally from Lebanon and now based in Brussels, Rawaa has had a really interesting background, starting in academic work all the way through to PhD research, making the transition from there into the commercial world, but still in a research capacity with Baxter, and then making the transition full-time to Resortecs, where she is now, who have a huge ambition to redefine the textile and fashion industry. In this episode, we discuss the transition from an academic career into a commercial one, how the technology that Resortecs have is designed to reduce carbon, improve sustainability, and have positive impact to the wider business models, but also around the textile industry as a whole and what's needed to transform, change, and improve the sector. So if that sounds like it could be of interest to you, dive right in. So Rawaa, welcome to Better Than We Found It.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Excellent. For those listening who perhaps don't know about you and the organisation, would you mind just giving a quick overview and intro to yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Rawaa Ammar. I'm Chief Sustainability and Impact Officer at Resortecs. Resortecs stands for Recycling Sorting Technology. We are based in the heart of Europe, in Brussels, and we are trying to solve the issues of the textile industry.
Excellent.
Through design for disassembly and eco-design innovations.
And we've got lots to dive into there, but as I like to in this conversation, I always like to start at the beginning and understanding the journey people have been on to get to this, and certainly keen today to talk about that shift from academia to the corporate world and the journey you've been on. But perhaps let's start right back at the beginning. So you were born in Lebanon, and perhaps you could explain a bit more about your childhood and whether there was much focus around sustainability or how that angle played into your early years.
Yeah, sure. So indeed, I was born in Lebanon in a small village that is elevated at 1,600 meters above sea level. So it's quite pristine, and I was from the lucky generation before the technology took full hit, and had a blessing to be surrounded by my grandparents and the great gold generation, where they had a high value for nature and fields and resources. So it could kind of instilled in me since really young age the importance of appreciating resources that we have around, and being closer to the nature, to the mountains, to the fields, to the rivers, gave this kind of attachment, if you will, and that followed up with more than 20 years in the Scouts, and that was kind of a direction for me to choose my scientific red line, if you will, in studying. So I did biology, and then for bachelor, and then I did master's in environmental science, specifically on water, and pursued a PhD in Belgium about the the impact of anthropogenic activities, specifically agriculture and industrial, on the environment. And that's how it started my academic journey. And then I followed it up with postdocs, and I worked quite some time in academia before shifting to corporate.
Sure. Well, academia is actually a space I don't know very well at all, so I'm very interested to pick your brains a little bit more around that. But I suppose to start with, the shift from that environment to a corporate world and sustainability will be some. So maybe you could start by talking a bit about the academic world and what is that like for individuals who have only been in industry, who are perhaps interested in perhaps more of the science. Could you just explain a bit more about what is it like working in an academia, and how does, what does a day look like? I mean, I'm really interested.
Yeah, I think at least for me, it was free curiosity playground. That's how I would describe academia and research. So to be very specific, I was more in the research part and try to work on applied sciences, to try to first understand the processes and then find solutions. And that's why we need to understand first what's happening and what's the impact to come up with the right solutions. And in academia, you are just curious, you are limited by the scientific facts, by the parameters of the experiment, and you just fail and you change factor, and then you do it again, and then you do it again until you find the answer, hopefully, and try from there to deduct conclusions and then come into implications. What does that mean? How I can use that? So it was a little bit more kind of free range of testing and experimenting compared to corporate, where you still need science, you still need to be curious, you still need to try and fail and move fast forward, but there's no socio-economical parameters that you have to take into your experiment. And that's, I think, the big difference between being in science, research, academia, and corporate, because this aspect is very critical to take into account, because that's how the business is working. You have to apply so many socio-economical parameters to figure out a solution that would work and that will move the needle.
For sure. And what's the actual culture like in the world of academia? Are you working alone? Are you working in teams or small teams? How much are you interacting with others? Like what does that look like from a more kind of social perspective?
Well, because I was a PhD and a postdoc, so you have your own project with your own budget that you have to run on your own. But of course, you have sometimes colleagues and of course supervisors and a jury that you have to rely on to get information. You have the community, the academic community, to discuss with and kind of pick up their brains. So it's not completely solitary, but for a big part of it, yes, you need to fly solo, you need to push on your own. While in business, this is rarely the case. You need to really be part of the team for things to happen.
For sure.
And of course, I think also the personalities are different, because in academia, especially when you are very much deep down in a very specific aspect, it's kind of a niche. More or less, people have same aspects, same personalities, very factual. While in business, you have all types of personalities, all types of profiles that you have to accommodate your working day-to-day life with them.
So what prompted...
So discussions are different.
Yes, yeah, I'm sure they're at a higher level in academia than perhaps the one we're having right now, but I won't take any offense to that. So what was it that prompted this shift? You'd obviously been doing that, you'd been successful. Why move across and take on a big challenge, I suppose, to shift industries into corporate world?
Yeah, I was very curious and very happy, and I worked a lot on my own in my current projects, but also I supervised master students. I even took up teaching as a visiting professor in the University of Beirut, and I loved the experience. I loved every bit of it, but it was in the same time frustrating as that you do the experiments, you know what needs to be done, but then you feel like, okay, how can this have a short, tangible impact that I can feel, that my efforts and experience and hard work can be like I can see it in action. And that was the reason to move. Specifically in my postdoc, I did 3 years of postdoc between Belgium and Paris. And it was about the natural withdrawal of CO2 by the ocean, which is kind of natural decarbonization, if you will. And that was a super interesting field to dive in and explore. But I felt like after 3 years, I need to work so much until anything tangible, until a tangible solution out there. And I wanted to see impact faster. So that was the motive for me to move to corporate, because I felt like my efforts I can see the results quicker.
Sure. And tell us about that move then. So where did you land from a corporate perspective, and also what did you notice immediately as some of the main differences and challenges that you would have to face in this new role?
So yeah, I mean, the shift was not easy. I think it's not fair to compare. Yeah, academia and business they have their own merits and their own environment, but I had to learn a lot, and it was a steep learning curve on a technical level, but also on personal level and on social level, to understand and to work in a corporate environment. But I think the most interesting thing is to try to be realistic in a sense that in science there's no no's and impossibles. You just try. If it doesn't work, okay, that's the scientific impossible. You understand why it's not working. While in business, it's different. You have to take so many factors. You have to learn the new skills. From a very scientific background, you know nothing about finance. You know nothing about marketing. You know nothing about communication. Even the communication, that was very funny for me, because the first reports I start writing, and I had very difficult discussions with our communication lead, because the wording I was very factual and maybe using complex language to explain things. And then he wanted to simplify it. And when I see it simplified, I was like, but that sounds stupid. And actually, then I realized, no, it needs to be simplified, because simple is easy to digest this information and make the point across. So the audience is different. So all these little details that you have to take into account, and that's what I referred to earlier, the socioeconomic background of it, to take all these aspects into account and build those expertise to work in a corporate. But I think I had the privilege of having the scientific background to handle both and play my role as I should play as a sustainability leader.
For sure. And of course, there is no doubt that science plays a huge part in the sustainability journey that we're all on, and ensuring that there's facts to back up the claims that are made and all those areas. But you're right, that transition from being so technical that actually you can't engage an audience, to providing enough information that makes it factual, but also to engage an audience, is a pendulum, I suppose, that lots of organizations and individuals can struggle with. And we see that as a skill set that is becoming extremely important to our clients. It's the ability to translate technical, complex issues into simple and easy to understand messages. Was there a point in that journey for you where you realized, okay, I've got this now, I understand the type of way in which I need to translate, or where do you feel like you are on that journey?
I think I'm still learning, right? I'm a scientist in the hardcore, so it's really difficult when you are trained for all your life to write and read and work in certain terminology. I made a big strides on it, a lot of progress. I think I still do better, and then just keep learning. And of course, the audiences, as you can see now in social media with different generation, what you could explain to the 90s is different from what you can explain to the Gen Z or so ever. So we have to keep learning and adapting to the audience, I believe.
Sure. So tell me about the journey then. So out of the postdoctoral research work that you were doing, you then moved to Baxter. Is this correct? And was this
Yes.
still in this was still in a research capacity, but within a corporate, or would you mind explaining just what
Yes,
that role,
correct.
how it came around?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was clear for me at that point that I wanted to see impact quicker, but I wanted to have not like a realistic shift where I still feel a little bit in my comfort zone. So I wanted to do in a research. So I moved to Baxter Research and Development department here in Belgium, and I worked in that capacity for more than 5 years, working on impurities and working really with great projects where I was able to hone my skills around how the corporate work. And that was a great opportunity for me because it was an international company with a lot of bright minds where science and business kind of cross in a very important field as the health sector. That gave me a lot of experience and a lot of understanding and business acumen to start building up. And while I'm in this journey, I met Cedric and I started working on Resortecs in parallel. So it kind of made this right stepping stone in my professional growth, if you will, and growing slowly to that role where I can mix all my skills together to be able to fulfill my role at Resortecs when I made the move almost 2 years ago as a full-time.
For sure, but I think there's a real good lesson in that to anybody listening who's thinking about a career transition or moving into something that's slightly outside of their comfort zone, that you did it with a nice stepping stone in between. That research role, but in a corporate, means, as you said, you retain some of the skill set and strengths that you already have while stretching in other capacities. Sometimes we're approached in our recruitment business by people who want to make the seismic shift from something completely unrelated to a full-time sustainability role. And I think the challenge with that is you're going completely outside of your comfort zone, but also you perhaps don't have any, you have strengths in softer areas, but you perhaps don't have some of the harder skills that actually a company would value. So I suppose what I hear from you and what I would recommend is, if you are looking to transition, it's always important to try to still rely on some of the strengths that you've gained in your previous career that you can use in this new role.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the privilege of working in an international corporate and then back into a startup, which is also two different worlds on their own, and kind of mixing all the experiences from these different domains, I think shaped my skills in a very peculiar way that allows you to think about, you have your different critical thinking, you have different problem solving aspects or angles to see things from a different perspective. So for me, definitely that worked really, really nice as preparing me to where I am today.
For sure.
And I cannot recommend it more rather than a quick and an abrupt shift.
For sure. So tell us more about Resortecs then. And you said you were introduced to Cedric and started working in some capacity. So tell us about that first meeting and first understanding of the mission that Resortecs had and what drew you to the organization, Cedric, and then perhaps how that developed.
Yeah, I think since I knew what I wanted, right, I wanted to work in something environmental. So I know that this shift to Baxter was very vital and important for me to build these skills, but I wanted to work closer to a sustainability project. And I think it was clear in my mind that's what I was looking for, that what I was be careful to discuss with people. And through a networking event, I met a person, and that she was already working. Her name is Vanessa, and she is also a co-founder at Resortecs. And then we were discussing, and I explained to her that that's what I'm looking for to do. And I think that's another point of how important you voice what you need to do to keep a look, to network, to express things, because sometimes you don't know who could make the connection. And then she told me, I need you to meet Cedric. And then we went for a dinner with Cedric, and Cedric explains to me his vision and his idea. We wanted to build. He was already building Resortecs, so he started in it in 2017, mid 2017, and I joined him early 2019, and it took me 5 minutes to tell him I'm on board, because the idea was very attractive. The solution was very brilliant, simple and sophisticated in the same time. It is what I wanted to do. Of course, I had reservation. As fashion industry, it's something I didn't think about. I have no experience in it whatsoever, but the impact of it and the vision and what can be done with it, it was no brainer for me that I wanted to be part of this journey. And without hesitation, I jumped ships.
For sure. And one of the things that stood out to me when we were talking before was this impressive vision and goal and mission to reduce textile emissions by 1 billion tons by 2050. Tell me a bit about that ambitious goal. Of course, I can hear from that the impact you want to have is there, it's tangible, it's something that you can see. So how did this goal come around? And tell me a bit more about how you are going to bring this to life.
Yeah, so let's step back a little bit, because as I mentioned, I didn't know nothing about textile industry. And then when I met Cedric and I started doing research and started discussing, I was shocked. As also somebody in academia who worked on environmental science, I didn't realize how polluting this industry is. We sometimes overlook how polluting it is. So just some figures and facts to throw around to just give a context. The fashion industry or textile industry is the fourth most polluting industry in the world. Is responsible for about 10% of global CO2 emissions. That's huge. It's responsible for the consumption of 20% of water and the water pollution around the world. I mean, 1/5 of our water is polluted because of the activities around fashion industry. For me, these figures were frightening. The more I was researching, the more I was understanding of the impact of the production and the huge complications and the ramified value chain around the fashion industry. I realized the immense of the problem, and then there was no way that we have to tackle it ASAP to find a solution for that. So the problem of the fashion industry comes from the overproduction and huge waste generation. And the solution from Resortecs is to solve or correct this kind of practice. So as an impact-driven company, the first thing is to do is first, how are we going to do it? How are we going to scale up our business to scale up our impact, and what we can achieve with that. So falling back to my scientific background, I want to use our scientific-backed data and scientific-based targets to follow, which are universally followed, to see how we can do this shift in the textile industry to get into this or keep the 1.5 degrees or now 2 degrees. People are interchangeably using the two figures from Paris Agreement. And then we start seeing if we apply our technology in the textile industry to shift this classical, historic, linear economy from make, break, waste into something circular, into something regenerative. What are the environmental credentials that we can gain by shifting these processes from linear to circular, and then use life cycle assessment approach to calculate and understand, and then set realistic targets based on our hopefully financial growth and penetration in the market and our vision to become the norm in the textile industry and what we can achieve. And using those information, we were able to set this target for 2050.
Wow. Yeah. Well, thank you for explaining that. And yeah, it's a great ambition, but as you say, backed by science, which makes me feel more confident that you will achieve your goals. You've described to me sustainability and impact as two distinct aspects that you look at. Could you share your approach to this, and I suppose how they sit independently but also come together in your role?
Yes. The way I see sustainability and impact, if you will, is like kind of a horizontal scale, where in the middle of the scale you have 0, and on the left side of the scale you have the negative part, on the right side you have the positive part. Sustainability occupies the part of the scale from negative to 0. So everything that companies and individuals and governments are trying to do to be less harmful, to move that needle from less negative and ambitiously toward zero emission. While impact is what you kind of intentionally extra activities, walking extra mile to do even better, to create a positive impact and shift the needle even further than just zero emission, but creating a positive impact, not only on the environment, but also on the society.
Okay, I understand.
So working with these two both scales in my role, I focus on the first part, so on the sustainability, to work on our environmental, social, and governance, to address our day-to-day processes, operation, running the office, running our production and marketing and whatnot, to try to make it less impactful, to put in place more sustainable approach for how we carry business day to day to become zero emission. And then on the other hand, how to use our sustainable business development and what we can create and unlock as a positive impact on the industry we are working on and ultimately on the planet.
For sure, I understand. So if we look at the reducing the bad and the sustainability angle, to your point, I think we should start with waste, because textile waste, as you say, is a huge issue globally, and only getting worse. So what role does Resortecs play in transforming, I suppose, the industry's approach to waste, and try to bring it more into a circular model?
So Resortecs kind of key value proposition is that, and I think that what distinguishes the solution in the kind of a circularity runner role that Resortecs is playing and taking, is that we work on circularity and sustainability, and that's also very different, right? Because you can put in place sustainable practices, you can put in place sustainable material. And I'm trying to use here loosely the word to describe any sector, not only textile, because it's applied on everything. So you can use a sustainable material, and then you can check the box of sustainability, while circularity is something else. And then what Resortecs is putting out on the table is like, okay, we have this problem with fashion and it's the waste. Instead of only focusing how we do with the waste when the waste is here, let's be thinking about the root cause, why the waste arrived here and in this volume. So the solution starts at the design phase from the set go. So our solution starts at the design phase with the concept of design for disassembly. So when you are designing a product, you design it to be disassembled to enable its repair, reuse, of course, if it's reused, but then repair, remake, and recycling, and not allowing it to go to waste, or allow very, very little or small part of it that goes to waste, and salvage all the materials and resources and putting them back in the cycle. By that, you're not only reducing the waste during this process, but also you're avoiding the need to source new material, virgin material that on its own will take a lot of resources as well. So what we do is that we have this innovation based on two parts of the solution. So the first part is a smart stitch, and the second part, the smart disassembly, and they go hand in hand. So at the design phase, we have innovated a smart stitch, which is a stitching thread that behaves like the normal stitching thread. You just need to change the bobbin. You don't change anything. And then you sew, you design your product with it, where these different materials are attached. So if it's a shirt, like the buttons, if it's a jacket, the zippers, the elastic band, the hood elastic, the labels, everything that is made of different material that you attach this or use the stitching thread to attach it to the different fabric or two types of fabric, and then the product lives normally. So its durability is intact. It will not be compromised. There's no trade-off. You can wash, dry, even iron the clothes with that. And at end of life, when the product is no longer in use phase, and it might require either repair or recycling, we apply specific heat using our smart disassembly system. And this specific heat will target only this thread. That's why we call it smart. And this thread will simply melt. When it melts, it frees the different components that were associated together, and then an automatic sorting will take place where the different layers will be and parts will be separated, and then we will have a high quality sorted feedstock ready for textile to textile recycling. And that's a closed loop circularity where the material goes back to make a new garment without going to generate a new source of material and without having it prematurely downcycled to, let's say, insulation material or carpets and the like. So that's the solution.
Understood. So just to dive into a couple of areas there. So you said that the stitching can just replace the current use of stitching that's used right now, and it doesn't require much change for the manufacturers to use that. Could you just perhaps talk about that in a little bit more detail?
Yeah, so we have developed several types of smart stitch to adapt to several applications. So imagine that you are using the stitching thread in a product that contains silk is different than a product that has leather or cotton. So they have a different compatibility to heat, different use phases, because maybe, a ski jacket will not be washed as much as baby clothes. So we have to respect the use phase and take that into consideration to have this. And therefore we have developed several stitching threads that melt between 150 and 200 degrees that exist in different thicknesses and different colors. And they are produced and they are just simply creates the spool that the garment maker can just put on the existing infrastructure of sewing. There's no need to buy any specific machinery to adapt to the stitching thread. So the stitching thread is just, you can put it on current stitching machines, and it would just behave normally during the stitching process. So you just simply use it as a classical stitching thread. And during the use phase, it behaves as the stitching thread with the same durability and quality requirements, how it behaves during washing cycles and ironing and just to keep things together as long as the product is in use. But when we want it to be separated, then we have the control to make it disappear.
I see. Okay. And further up, you mentioned that you're involved in, I suppose, sustainable design at the beginning end. So who are the interactions and engagements with to allow that to happen? And who would the clients be that you'd be interacting with to ensure sustainable design?
Yeah, so this is a very critical point because we collaborate directly with brands and the designers in the brands to work with them together in understanding their products, understanding their material, and even informing them or educating them where the thread can be used and giving them suggestions that this material is not recyclable. Yeah, we can use the thread in it, but at the end of the day, it's not recyclable. So we don't want to put our thread in it because there's no point putting it on the market. Or for example, a pool like mine, it's a mono material. It doesn't require our thread. So why bother? Mm-hmm. So we don't put it where it doesn't need to be put. But if a product is complex and it's called multi-material or multi-layer, where there are several layers, then it requires disassembly before design. So to give maybe an example from our household, if you are at home and you have a package or a food container that is combined of two different materials, maybe paper and a plastic, and if we are sorting at home, we cannot throw them in the same garbage bag. We need to remove and put each in a different garbage bag. Same needs to happen in the textile industry. The issue is that they are stitched together. And that's how we help the brands and the design phase to know where they need to stitch and with what material the fabric needs to be. So we work closely with the designers in the fashion brands, but not only fashion brands. So we're talking here about luxury brands. We're talking about mass market. We talk about eco warriors, I would call them, in the fashion, where they have more advanced and more committed agendas, let's say, in shifting the textile industry. But also we work on accessories, shoes, automotive, even bed mattresses. So we have done a lot of pilots, and some pilots are commercialized with brands the likes of H&M, Bershka, Decathlon, Conundrum, Unspun, Honest, and Bicard Deslay. And today we launched our collaboration with Siyun, which is a workwear company, which is a very, very complex and very unique case, because it's a very complex from a sense of the technicality of the material, but also on top of it needs to be durable and functional. It needs to keep the worker safe. So we need to make sure that this is not compromised, neither the safety nor the durability, but in the same time that it will not end up as a waste at end of use.
For sure. And if we go, and congratulations for the success that you've had so far, by the way. It's some great names and brands there. But just to finish there, I suppose kind of the end of use. So you said that at the end of use of the product is when it can go into this process where the specific heat can be applied to remove this smart stitching. So is that something that you deliver at Resortecs, or do you have partners who provide that technology? How does that work?
Yeah, so we have our circular business model is a hybrid financial model, as our solution is divided into two pieces. So we have the stitching thread that acts as a consumable that is sold to brands and garment makers. And then there's the disassembly system, which we run on our own or with partners, where we charge a service fee. So by volume of textiles that are made with Resortecs stitching thread, we'll pass in, and then we will process. The model is a little bit, it's not the perfect example, but just to make it simple, close to the Nespresso machine. So you have the caps and you have the machine. So the caps are the consumables, and then you have the machine, which is stationary, and then you run it. As this innovation cannot happen without partners, and it's to change the linear system to literally bend it into a circular one. So it requires a systemic change. And there are so many stakeholders around the value chain. So it would require a very high level of collaboration and partnership, and less of the competition, which is a little bit different. But I think the planet requires from us to step above the classical competition ways of doing business and collaborate where we are complementary to each other's solutions. So Resortecs work with the brands and garment manufacturers at the upstream of the supply chain, and with collectors, sorters, and recyclers downstream of the supply chain, and make the connection with the upstream pod, bending the circle and using this information to inform each different partner on the needs and the challenges. Because normally, classically, those two pillars, if you will, in the textile industry, either on the waste side or on the brand side, they don't speak to each other. There was no chance for them to speak to each other before. But now the waste of the first is the input of the second. So they need to understand what they can process and what they cannot process and what they need. And that's why we have partners in collectors and sorters and recyclers to implement our system. We can run it by ourselves, but also it's better to put it at more centralized places where more waste can be collected, and therefore we can process more volumes, which make it more operationally feasible, financially viable, and allow us to generate more impact eventually.
For sure, and the two main things that come out to me when you're talking about that is, one, around the ability to communicate and engage, going back to the kind of scientific versus commercial world. Of course, you have science in your technologies and the abilities that you have, but if you can't communicate that with those partnerships, the business model becomes very difficult. And then number two, as you've highlighted, by doing that, you then can start to look at the more of the commercial returns and how you create value in a new mainstream standard operating model, which are both fascinating ways to drive value creation, I suppose, through something that's for good. So really keen to hear and continue to track how that goes. What would you say, looking ahead, are some of the milestones then that you're aiming to achieve in the shorter term to try to create that mainstream adoption?
Yeah, we are we are a very ambitious company, and we don't shy from really stating our ambition. We want to have our solution as a standard solution, as a norm, a classical stitching thread to become a thread that is designed for disassembly. And to do that, we need to penetrate the market, convince all the market to convert into this approach, increase our production, scale it up either through licensing agreement or partnerships. That's on the stitching thread part. And on the disassembly part, we cannot do this alone. Nobody can. And everybody needs a partner in the value chain. So we want to create pools, if you will, or ecosystems that we are heavily engaging in creating. We will start to kind of do it at a geographical local level, which makes more sense, to concentrate waste in a more geographical level where all the value chain partners can be connected, and then you can centralize waste collection and then appropriate sorting and then sending to the different recycling venues. We want to create this in one place, reiterate, copy, paste, and repeat in other geographical locations. So now we are focusing on the Benelux area, which is Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. We're looking for France and the DACH region, and then going maybe to Spain and Portugal to cover Europe, and then move to Asia and US and so on and so forth. So we want to create these fuel hubs of circularity at these different strategic geographical locations to make it work, and then copy and repeat.
I understand. And if you are, which I hope that, I have no doubt you will be, but if you are successful in achieving your goals of reducing the emissions by 1 billion tonnes by 2050, what kind of impact do you think that's going to have on the textile industry and, I suppose, sustainability as a whole?
Yeah, and maybe just before jumping into that, let me very clear here. Those impacts we will achieve, they will not be in Resortecs balance. So if there's an investor asking us, oh, what did you do on your CO2 emissions? I cannot claim those CO2 emissions happen in our balance because they are not in our scope. They are in the scope 3 of the brands and the recyclers. Mm-hmm. So it's really altruistic, kind of putting the good elsewhere. And if we manage to help the textile industry converting to becoming circular, and therefore using the textile waste as a source to create new garments that are needed with the right volumes in the market, reducing 1 billion ton of CO2 by 2050 can achieve a huge reduction, almost 1/5 of the required reductions the fashion industry needs to make to respect the scientific-based target of 1.5 degrees of Paris Agreement. So it's a huge impact on the industry with just a simple change of changing the stitching thread. And that's the whole impact on the whole industry. So you can imagine pulling in more solution, that industry will be zero emission, and obviously will have a huge impact on cleaning and decarbonizing this industry, and ultimately on our planet, on our real existence as a species on this planet.
For sure. You mentioned investors then, and I think that's actually a good segue into the role that investors and investment can play in scaling these innovative solutions, not just in the textile industry, but I suppose across all industries and all business models that do need to be looked at and changed and adapted to bring circularity into them. So, what role do you see investment playing in this, and how can we attract more investment into these new solutions?
I mean, investment is playing a very critical role in bringing these solutions, innovative solutions, green techs into flourishing and into existence, into working. Companies like ours, with such solutions, we are deep tech. We have very high R&D bill, and it's a circular process. So circular process means the money will come in sustainably. It will be sustainable financial plan, but it needs time. And of course, the risk is higher because we are talking about a systemic change. So you need to do a lot of hard work putting in the infrastructure to let this roll out. And the short money and short gains is not foreseen at the beginning. So a lot of companies that I saw, and we are working with a lot of companies, we see, especially as a very active startup moving onto the scale up, we hear a lot about the death valley between, for example, first funding round and Series A or Series B. And there's no one able to jump in to kind of fill in the gap. An investor's role needs to be there. Otherwise, solutions like this will just collapse and they will not materialize, and their impact will be not achieved. So impact investors, or investors in general, they can be impact. They need to be more patient and willing to accept the risk for the short term, because doing so, they are really de-risking what's happening on the other side. If I take fashion industry with the climate change, if we keep doing business as usual, keep overproduction and keep waste generation with the climate crisis that we have. I mean, countries like in Far East Asia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, they were really suffering in the past few years with heat waves and floods that really risk the business on its essence. The whole transportation, the whole value chain, that will be under risk. So there will be no business if the climate change is not addressed adequately for that business. And you can take the same aspect for every type of business. When we are doing this kind of investment in such companies, you're basically de-risking the business on the long term. And I think that approach, investors need to look into their investment positioning and choices in their portfolio from this aspect.
For sure, and you've mentioned that you're on this journey, so by no means the finished article yet. But I'm sure there's been a lot of lessons you have learned so far to get to this point. What would you say to leaders of organisations who have similar ambition or other startups that are about to take this journey that you may have learned in your time so far?
I'll be very honest. It's not right in the park. It's not a picnic. It's very difficult, and it would require a lot of perseverance and resilience. But from my personal journey and Resortecs' journey thus far, I think two things stands out. Stay true to your integrity. And that means scientific and to your mission. Don't compromise your integrity despite the tough times that you will face, because that's what explains who you are and the impact and the true impact you want to generate. And the second thing, be very careful of choosing the team. The team around you, especially the startups at the beginning. For any company, it's the same, but for startups, it's very, very critical to have the right people in the team. Resortecs couldn't exist on one person or two if it's the whole team, and we are so privileged and blessed to have the best minds and spirits in the team that allows the hardship to conquer it, at least together, and keep a hope and keep pushing, and I think the team selection is a priority for any startup.
For sure. Excellent. Well, yeah, thank you. And on my own startup journey in a slightly different angle, but I absolutely would echo that advice that your team is the one thing that you have and you can rely on. So it's so crucial to have the right people. I've got some quick fire questions, if you don't mind. I'd love to test you with, and then we'll finish with better than we found it overall. So outside of Resortecs, what's one sustainability trend in fashion that you're most excited about?
I think I'm more inclined to more circular solutions in fashion. and that the reduction, the repair, there's a lot of upcycling. There's not one in particular, but anything that's related to circularity, I'm more prone and attracted to than other solutions.
Sure. And if you could implement one global policy tomorrow that could cover anything on the ESG sustainability impact side, what would it be?
I'm thinking from a European perspective. There's the Eco Design for Sustainable Products regulation that is been discussed and trying to be implementing in the coming years. I think if this kind of regulation or more enhanced version of it can be applied globally for all types of products, not only textile, but also packaging, cars, batteries, what have you. It's very important because it solves the problem at the design phase without have to dealing with it at the waste phase, because we already know what will happen when at end of life. So I think that's very critical to design for circularity, for the planet, for an impact, and not to design for waste.
For sure. And what would you say is the most challenging thing about circularity in textiles?
Textile industry is very ramified industry. It requires a lot of stakeholders across the value chain that is with an international footprint. And it's not only in fashion industry. The complexity, of course, in the fashion industry is more existent than other industries perhaps, but it's the compromise between environment and sustainability and business and financial gains. And I think that's the challenge that stirs any debate in that realm, and how we can make and keep a sustainable business, viable business, while respecting the climate and earth boundaries. That's the challenge for textile industry, and it's the same for any other sector.
Sure. And on a personal level, what's one sustainable practice that you try to follow every day?
I have a lot. I think it's very careful and mindful transportation routes, not avoiding using the car, cleaning my email, the junk and the deleted, and not having a lot of footprint. Be very careful about water use, energy use, using the stairs, not elevators, and most importantly, how you buy, your purchasing choices, and how you sort waste at home. I think all of us can do that in a very day-to-day, simple approach.
For sure, yeah. I would like it if in the UK in particular they made it easier to sort your waste, because it's I don't know if you've heard, but it's a bit of a nightmare in the local governments and councils with the way that they work so differently. And in one county it's great, and in others it can be very difficult. So I think that's a policy that can make things a lot easier. And then what about an eco-friendly material or product that you see that's emerging outside of Smart Stitch, of course, that could be interesting to you, or your favourite one that's out there?
I mean, there are very, very brilliant innovations out there. We are the chance to be part of a lot of accelerators and being finalists in a lot of those change makers, and Earthshot Prize, for example, and BMW Foundation, Ellen MacArthur, EIB, IC, European Innovation Council. So I saw a lot of amazing innovations in that realm. Each one of them has its own merit. I'm more inclined to the ones that have reducing packaging and water, but there's one called Traceless, where it's a bioengineering. They're using food waste to create food packaging. So it's a really brilliant company, and worth looking
what
and
are they
keeping
called?
it on the radar.
What are they called? Sorry.
Traceless.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna have a look at that. That sounds interesting.
Traceless.
Yeah, for sure. And lastly,
Yes.
who is your sustainability role model?
I don't have one, because it would be so unfair. I think everybody is trying their best to do their role, and in the same time, everybody is really behind. So we're not doing enough. You just have to be our own responsible citizen, and I think that's how we need to move on.
For sure. So being the responsible citizen that you are, by the end of your career, what would you like your personal legacy to be to show that you've left the world better than you found it?
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough question. I think one important, and I think maybe that goes back to my academia experience, is raising awareness and education about how we should do to save the planet and leave it better than we received it for our future generation. I'm expecting my first baby in a couple of months, and I would really love for the baby to have a word that is better than the way, because it freaks me out to know that the climate, or the world that I had the chance to be raised in my small village back in Lebanon, that the baby will not have the access to the same clean water, clean air, fertile soil, and healthy society around. So from that standpoint, I think the legacy I will like to leave behind is that I tried my best to move the needle, but most importantly, that helped a lot in raising awareness about sustainability for citizens, for businesses, and most importantly, for sustainability leaders, because we see now that the role is expanding, and seeing it and what we can do in our own capacity in every school, house, company, governmental position to move the needle and be slightly better.
For sure. Well, congratulations, firstly, and I'm sure it's
you.
very, when it becomes so personal like that, then of course it's something that you will not rest until you make sure it's a reality. So, best of luck with the new arrival. Look, the time's flown by. It's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you for sharing so much. I'm sure there'll be people that are listening that are interested in the technology and Resortecs as an organisation, and to hear more. So, if people are keen to interact, engage, connect with you, what's the best place for them to do so?
Yeah, absolutely. Would love that. They can reach us on the website and our social media and LinkedIn. And we are very happy to engage in discussions with like-minded people, or convert people to become like-minded sustainability warriors as us.
For sure, absolutely. Brilliant. Well, look, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I look forward to tracking Resortecs and the journey that you're on. I'm sure you are already making a great impact, but look forward to seeing that systemic change that you're going to bring about.
Thanks a lot, Josh. That was great.
Thank you so much. Speak soon.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Better Than We Found It. I hope you have found value from this to support your own purpose-led journey. This episode was brought to you by GS2 Partnership, my organisation focused on providing talent solutions for sustainably focused organisations. We are driven by our purpose of connecting the people who believe in leaving the world better than we found it. If you are looking for a partner to support you with your hiring plans, or you are looking for your own career next steps, please reach out to us or personally drop me a message on LinkedIn. It's great to hear from listeners to the podcast, and I'd welcome the opportunity to talk to you. Thank you very much, and stay tuned for our next episode.